They didn't get Al Capone for murder. They got him for taxes. And they didn't arrest Prince Andrew for what everyone expected. Here's why powerful people almost never go down for the things you think that they will. Welcome back to Exhibit A List, where pop culture gets cross examined. I'm your host, Jasmine Weg. I'm a lawyer, and this week we have stories that are going to make you think twice about everything. Prince Andrew was arrested, but not for the decades old allegations that everyone remembers. A federal judge has just ruled that boneless wings can still be called wings, even though they're basically chicken nuggets, and chefs are taking sides. Influencer prenups are officially a thing, and they're way more complicated than regular prenups. Bravo allegedly added a mega clause to Real Housewives of Salt Lake City contracts that could get cast members fired for leaking storylines. And everyone is talking about whether Ghislaine Maxwell was spotted in Canada. Guys, if you're not following me already on Instagram, what's going on? I'm on Instagram at Jasmine Weg ESQ, and the podcast is at Exhibit A List Pod. Come DM me. Let me know what you thought of this episode. Share a screenshot of you listening to this episode, and I'll repost it. Engage. I always respond. I'm also on TikTok, Jazz the Lawyer. I post my most unhinged content there, and it's super fun. If this episode hits, please follow the show, leave a rating or review, share it with someone who needs to hear it. I would appreciate it so much. Now, guys, let's get into it. Let's talk about why powerful people never go down for what you expect. On February 19th, 2026, which happened to be his 66th birthday, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly known as Prince Andrew, was arrested at his residence on the Sandringham estate. He was held for about 11 hours and then released under investigation, which means that no formal charges have been filed yet. And here's what's interesting. He was not arrested for the sexual abuse allegations that have followed him for years. Basically, he wasn't arrested for the things we totally expected him to be in light of the release of the Epstein files. He was arrested, though, on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The allegation is that while he was serving as the UK's trade envoy, a role that he held for a decade, he shared confidential government information with Jeffrey Epstein. This comes directly from the documents in the recently unsealed Epstein files that suggest that Andrew passed sensitive trade reports and potentially other classified information on to Epstein. Misconduct in public office is a common law offense in the UK that deals with serious willful abuse or neglect of the power or responsibilities of public office. It carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment. So, think about it, guys. It's ostensibly possible that Prince Andrew could serve life in prison, not for the things that we've been hearing that he's guilty of for years, allegedly, but for trade secrets. That's just an interesting turn of events. And it just begs the question, why this charge? Why aren't we seeing the other allegations that everyone has been talking about for years? And the answer is because this is a prosecutorial strategy. And it's something that we actually see over and over with powerful people. When you're building a case against someone who has resources, lawyers, and institutional protection, you don't necessarily go for the charge that feels the most morally serious. You go for the charge that has the clearest evidence, the lowest burden of proof, and the highest chance of conviction. Now, sexual abuse allegations, especially ones that allegedly happened years ago or even decades ago, are notoriously difficult to prosecute. Even when we adopt the mentality of believing all victims, we still in the court system require some credible proof. And the problems with these cases is they come down to credibility battles. It's testimony versus testimony. There's rarely physical evidence when years has passed after so much time has passed, and juries, especially in high profile cases, they can be unpredictable. But passing confidential government documents to a convicted sex offender, there's a paper trail there. There is potentially memos, emails, records of what information that Andrew had access to as a trade envoy, and evidence of what Epstein received from him, if it happened. That is a case that you can build on through straight up documentation. It's not going to rely on witness testimony and create that testimony versus testimony issue that we see in those other types of cases. And what's interesting is that we've seen this with other high profile people not going down for the crime you think that they will. It's similarly the reason why Al Capone went down ultimately for tax evasion instead of the murders and racketeering everyone knew he was doing. Tax evasion has a clear paper trail. The IRS could prove if he had income and he didn't report it. That was clean and it was winnable. It's the same reason Harvey Weinstein's initial conviction wasn't based on the most famous allegations against him from the biggest celebrities. Prosecutors went with the victims and the evidence that would be the hardest to attack in court. And this is how the criminal justice system works when you're dealing with people who have money and power. You find the charge that sticks, even if it's not the charge that everyone is focused on. Think about O.J. Simpson. He was ultimately convicted for 12 charges from a Las Vegas hotel robbery, including armed robbery, kidnapping, conspiracy to commit a crime, assault with a deadly weapon, but he never went down for the murder of his wife. So it's interesting to see how they're able to sometimes get these people on other charges because they're easier to prove ultimately. Now, does this mean that Prince Andrew won't face other consequences? I'd say not necessarily, but the legal system moves on what can be proven and not on what people believe would happen or what feels like justice or how justice should be served. Even when it feels sticky and it's upsetting that someone is not being brought to justice for what is apparently or seems clearly to be the truth, it is still reassuring when you see someone like Prince Andrew and he is going to face justice, at least for something that he's done. King Charles actually released a statement saying that the law must take its course and that authorities have his full support. That's significant because it means the royal family is not protecting Andrew from this process. I think instead they probably want to distance themselves because he's been a scorn on their name. The investigation is ongoing. The police are leading it with support, and he has not been charged yet, but being released under investigation means that the case is still active and charges could come later. The broader point that I think is important to take away from this is when you hear about a powerful person being investigated or charged with something that seems smaller or less serious than what you expected, it doesn't always mean that they're getting away with something. Sometimes it means that prosecutors are forced to be strategic because they need evidence that is provable in court, and they're going with charges that are provable and winnable because they want to be able to win the case. The question ultimately is whether that strategy leads to accountability or whether it lets people off the hook for the things that really matter. I would love to hear you guys weigh in on the comments, and it's something that we're each probably going to decide for ourselves. Now, is your Instagram account going to be worth more than your house in a divorce? Let's talk about influencer prenups. They're officially having a moment, and if you think it sounds ridiculous, then I think it's time we sit and think about what's actually at stake here. A traditional prenup deals with things like houses, retirement accounts, savings, maybe a business, tangible assets that have clear valuations. But an influencer prenup has to deal with something way more complicated: intangible assets. We're talking about social media accounts, follower accounts, brand partnerships, intellectual property rights to content, future earning potential from deals that haven't even been signed yet. And the big question is, if a couple builds an account together, who owns it if they split? According to People magazine, which just did a deep dive into this, influencer prenups are being drafted by matrimonial attorneys who are having to team up with intellectual property lawyers because the legal framework for this stuff barely exists yet. Here's what influencer prenups typically include. They've got social media clauses. Those set enforceable limits on what each person can post if the relationship ends. So this is kind of like your typical non-disparagement agreement, but it's built for the internet age. The problem is that it's incredibly hard to legally define what damaging content actually means when you're dealing with posts and Instagram stories. At this point, people even analyze who a famous figure likes, like what content they like on Instagram, what things they repost. All of that can be considered damaging because let's say someone reposts something slanderous or mean about the other party. You clicking repost to your 5 million followers is almost tantamount to you saying it yourself at this point. Another thing that's discussed in these influencer prenups is ownership of accounts. If you and your partner run a joint Instagram account with 2 million followers and 5K a year in brand deals, who's getting that in the divorce? The prenup needs to spell that out. Was it built together, or did one person create it and the other person just appeared in content? What about the Instagram husband who's filming all of those? In the middle of your coffee date, he's getting on his phone to get that perfect picture of the wife. Does he get a stake? What if he's handling, or she is handling, the editing, scheduling, responding to DMs? Where does the ownership stake lie? Then there's revenue sharing. If you're a creator couple who collaborated on content, who owns the revenue stream? Who gets the brand deals? The prenup needs to answer these questions before a court has to. There is also talk in the influencer prenup about protection of personal brand. An influencer's name, image, and likeness are often their entire business. The prenup can state that those intellectual property rights belong solely to the influencer and that the spouse can't claim ownership or control. That also can go crazy when it comes to the name, when the name might be taken from that spouse who's not able to claim ownership. Wild. And then there's valuation. Social media accounts have a value, but the question is, how do you calculate it? Is it based on current earnings or the projected future earnings? Is it based on follower count or engagement rate? You need a forensic accountant or business valuation expert to assess these digital assets, and they probably are going to have to be up and up on Gen Z terms and Instagram and TikTok in 2026. Is your accountant quite knowledgeable on social media? I don't even know if mine is. Even then, it's still going to be complicated because an account's value can tank overnight. If the audience turns on you, they can also go up overnight. Here's a wild part. In California, which is a community property state, everything acquired during a marriage is jointly owned unless you have a prenup that says otherwise. So if you start dating someone, you get married, and during the marriage, your TikTok blows up. You start making 50K a month from brand deals. Your spouse potentially has a claim to half of that account's value in a divorce. The article mentioned a couple of high profile creator divorces that have made people wake up to this. Christy Sarah and Desmond Scott's very public split up reminded everyone that what's built together online does not always stay together. This makes me wonder about all of the influencers I follow and whether they're getting their influencer prenups together. Another thing that influencer prenups deal with is social media behavior during and after the marriage. They're discussing questions like, can you post joint photos without approval? What happens to content that features the both of you after you split? Can one person continue posting old content that includes the ex? What if you have kids? That's a big one. Can either of you post anything you want about them? Now, I know to many of you, it could sound like these are just petty concerns, but when you realize that for influencers, their public image is their livelihood, and influencers are making a lot more money than some of you realize. They are making bank in this industry. So it's a real livelihood that they need protection for. One bad post from an ex can tank brand deals. One leak of behind the scenes drama can destroy a carefully cultivated image. The penalties for violating these clauses can be significant. If you have a provision requiring a joint social media divorce announcement and then you violate it by posting first, you could face anywhere from thousands to millions of dollars depending on your financial situation and what's written in your prenup. Now, here's my take on this, and I want to be balanced. On one hand, I think it's smart for people whose entire income depends on their online presence to protect themselves legally. It's probably smart for people with all different sorts of backgrounds to think about a prenup if it makes sense for you. A prenup is not necessarily unromantic, it's practical in an age where unfortunately divorce seems extremely common. It's merely acknowledging that social media accounts are assets and that if things don't work out, you want clarity instead of a court battle. On the other hand, the fact that we've gotten to a place where Instagram handles and TikTok accounts are being valued like real estate in divorce proceedings tells you something about how the world has changed. And I don't know. It seems strange, but it's hard to say whether that's a good thing or just a weird thing. Either way, it's a reality that we're moving toward faster than ever. If you are an influencer or you're dating one, I would love to know if these conversations are happening before you take the next step and get serious. Please leave me a DM and let me know. We'll keep it anonymous. And now we've got a judge ruling on boneless wings because boneless wings are an important issue, I guess. A federal judge in Illinois just ruled that Buffalo Wild Wings can continue calling their boneless wings, even though they are, and I quote from the judge's ruling, essentially chicken nuggets. This case is so good, let me just give you the details. A Chicago man went to Buffalo Wild Wings in January 2023, ordered the boneless wings, when he realized that they were not, and this is shocking, they were not deboned chicken wings, but they were slices of chicken breast meat. He sued Buffalo Wild Wings for false advertising. And luckily for him, there's a lawyer who will take up just about any case when you live in the great old United States of America. His lawsuit claimed violations of the Illinois Consumer Fraud Act, breach of express warranty, common law fraud, and unjust enrichment. He wanted to bring a nationwide class action on behalf of himself and anyone else who was similarly deceived. I just want to take a second and talk about something that is kind of false in his claims because he says that Buffalo Wild Wings was unjustly enriched. This allegation kind of sounds like he thinks he overpaid for what he got. But white meat chicken is more expensive than chicken wings. We all know that. Even if they're deboning those chicken wings, which may be harder to do, so maybe it's like the labor cost, but value-wise, chicken breast is more expensive than chicken wings. At least where I shop. Anyway, back to the case. Buffalo Wild Wings filed a motion to dismiss, and on February 17th, the U.S. District Judge issued a 10-page ruling packed with puns. Judge said, "This is my moment. If I'm not going to be quoted on one of the life-changing decisions that this country is shaped on, I'm going to be quoted on my opinions on chicken wings. And you know what? I'm here for it, Judge, because you will be famous no matter what." The judge opened his opinion by quoting Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. "What's in a name? If we call a wing by any other name, would it smell as sweet?" He then wrote that plaintiff's complaint has no meat on its bones. Yes, Judge. Yes, Judge. Killing it with the puns. And that the plaintiff did not drum up enough actual factual allegations to state a claim. We love it. We love a punny dad joke judge. The core of his ruling is this: boneless wings is just like a fancy name and no reasonable consumer. And yes, reasonable is always the standard in the law. And the thing is, most people aren't reasonable. So that's, I wonder why they've never revisited what reasonable is. Like, have you heard the things that people drum up today? Like, reasonable is questionable. But anyway, he says no reasonable consumer would believe that they are actually eating deboned chicken wings. Now, I don't know because Okay, so I eat kosher, I don't eat wings that much, but boneless wings are not as big of a thing in the kosher world. But I feel like I definitely thought that boneless wings were deboned wings. So it's not like so obvious to everyone, but at the same time, I really don't see any damages. The judge cited a 2024 Ohio Supreme Court ruling that said that diners reading boneless wings on a menu would no more believe the restaurant was promising actual wing meat than someone eating chicken fingers would expect to be served fingers. Okay, I guess I'm unreasonably dumb. The judge also pointed out that boneless wings cost less than traditional wings at Buffalo Wild Wings, which should have been a clue that they're not the same product. If they were deboned wings, they would cost more because of the additional labor required, not less. Okay, so that's flipping my thoughts about the cost of chicken breast versus chicken wing. Buffalo Wild Wings celebrated that ruling by posting on social media. They're called boneless wings and will forever be called boneless wings. Okay, go off, Buffalo Wild Wings. They also had to throw some shade and say that their hamburgers contain no ham and their buffalo wings are 0% buffalo. Okay. Point made, Buffalo Wild Wings. Point made. You won this one. It basically, though, makes the legal point that lots of food names don't literally describe the product. Now, the judge actually did give the plaintiff leave to amend his complaint by March 20th if he can come up with additional facts that would support his claim. But the judge also wrote, Although it is difficult to imagine that plaintiff can provide additional facts about his experience that would demonstrate that BWW is committing a deceptive act by calling its nuggets boneless wings, the court will give him leave to try. That's kind. What's the legal principle here? Puffery. Puffery is exaggerated advertising claims that no reasonable person would take literally. World's best burger is considered puffery. Our coffee will change your life. That slogan is considered puffery. And apparently, boneless wings is considered puffery. You guys have to let me know your thoughts on this. The test here is whether a reasonable consumer would be deceived. The court said no. A reasonable consumer in 2026 knows that boneless wings are chicken breast chunks, not deboned wings. This case is funny, but it actually raises a real question about where the line between puffery and false advertising is. When does a misleading product name cross the line into fraud? And who decides what a reasonable consumer would believe? Or even what's reasonable? The online chefs have been weighing in on this and they're split. Some say boneless wings have always been a stupid name and they should just be called chicken nuggets. Others say that the name is fine because everyone knows what you're getting when you order them. From a legal standpoint, this ruling does make sense. Courts generally don't want to micromanage food naming conventions unless there's actual consumer harm. This plaintiff's lawsuit kind of undermines his claim because he admits that he knew immediately after receiving his order that they weren't deboned wings. So he wasn't deceived in a way that caused him any real lasting harm. He was just pissed off that the name didn't jive with his idea. Nonetheless, this is just a fun case. I think it'll be memed to death. And Buffalo Wild Wings is certainly going to ride its coattails on this one. And now let's talk about Bravo's new contract clause where Real Housewives could get fired for talking to bloggers. So Tamra Judge from Real Housewives of Orange County went on her podcast, Two Teas in a Pod, and she read a rumor that the Bravo fandom is in a spiral over. According to an anonymous source, the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City cast received their renewal letters for season 7, and all of the members, new and returning alike, were subject to a new mega clause, as she called it, and it's a non-negotiable for all new and returning cast members. It's reportedly called the Narrative Integrity Clause. Here's what the rumor says it does. Cast members are not allowed to create, influence, or leak storylines about the show or other cast members off camera. This includes using third parties as a proxy. Any on-camera discussions about unverified activity will be cut from the final edit. And any verified violations are punishable on a scale that includes financial penalties and loss of screen time, demotion, and firing. The source says that production is just not messing around anymore and they're tired of grasping at straws with this bunch and they know that they need to regain control. Tamara's reaction on her podcast said she fully supports it. She said, I think it should be zero tolerance, period. Her co-host on that episode was Dolores Catania, and she also agreed and said that cast needs this kind of guidance or they were going to end up becoming the new New Jersey, as she said, which she said as a warning because she's seen how the franchise has been affected by cast members leaking and manipulating storylines. So right now, this is just a rumor. Bravo has not confirmed the clause exists, but if it does, it's significant. I have personally reviewed the Real Housewives of New York City contract from Leah McSweeney's case, so that's not current as of 2026. It's from a couple years ago and it did not contain this clause, but I'm going to work hard to try to get my hands on the new contract if I can. Also, let me know in the comments if you want me to break down the one I have from a couple years ago and just do a deep dive on that. It's pretty interesting. But if this exists, it's quite significant because reality TV contracts have always had confidentiality provisions. The cast members typically can't talk about storylines before the episodes air. But this rumor clause allegedly would be going further. It would say that you can't even create or influence the storylines off camera, and then they get brought on camera. So it's not necessarily about spilling the tea, it's about doing work behind the scenes to orchestrate storylines. That is a direct response to the way some Housewives franchises have operated in recent seasons, where cast members feed stories to bloggers, which creates drama with each other on social media or text, and then they bring that manufactured drama onto the show. Production hates this because that means that they're not in control of the narrative. and they want control. In the end, they end up just reacting to storylines that the cast created externally. Sounds like they're getting pissed that the cast is trying to take the show that they're starring on into their own hands. From a legal standpoint, I think this type of clause, if it is as expressed, is probably legal to a degree. Reality TV cast members are typically classified as independent contractors and not employees, which means that they have fewer labor protections. So, if the contract says don't leak storylines or you'll be fired and you sign it, Bravo can enforce that unless they can then show that they were actually full employee status and that the independent contractor was a false classification, which is happening a lot for reality stars, especially on Love is Blind, and Married at First Sight is trying to get the same designation. Another tricky part here is going to be defining what counts as creating or influencing a storyline off camera. If two cast members genuinely have a conflict and they text about it, is that going to be considered creating a storyline? If they post something cryptic on Instagram and fans start to speculate, is that influencing the narrative? The clause would need to be very carefully written so that it can actually be enforceable without being overly broad. But the existence of this rumor clause, and whether it's real or not, tells you something about where Bravo is at with certain franchises. They're losing control. Cast members have figured out how to use social media and blogs to control their own narratives, and Bravo is just trying to claw that power back. I can't wait to see if this rumor is confirmed. If it is, it's going to change how certain housewives operate, and we're going to watch and evaluate. All right, let's do an honorable mention lightning round and do some quick hits on the stories everyone is buzzing about this week. Was Ghislaine Maxwell spotted in Canada? A video went viral on TikTok claiming to show Ghislaine Maxwell, who is supposed to be currently serving a 20-year sentence in federal prison, walking around freely in Canada. In the video, the person who's spotted her goes, Ghislaine, and then she turns and looks at the videoer, and then I think he repeats her name and she says that she does not know who that is or something like that. But everyone is harping on the fact that she turned when the name Ghislaine was called out and that it looks like her. People are doing matchups with the photo from that video of her and her photos from when she was last, outside of prison. And according to these websites that can match up facial structure, it's like a 92%. People are also looking at a recent photo that was released of her in prison where she is supposed to be going potentially to speak before the court. And they're saying that she looks very different in her new photo and it doesn't look like her. Her nose looks bigger. There's a lot of skepticism going on about her right now. There's a lot of conspiracies going on. I have no idea whether this is true or not. It's interesting. Let me know your thoughts. Moving on, LA County is suing Roblox. Los Angeles County just filed a lawsuit against Roblox, claiming the game platform is designed to addict children and it fails to adequately protect minors from predators. This follows similar lawsuits against social media platforms and ties into the social media addiction trial that we covered in episode 17. But this interesting part about how it also allows adults to potentially develop talking relationships with children that they can then take to other outside places and continue the conversation is disturbing. I think I've heard that can happen a lot on Roblox. I know that a lot of parents are cracking down on Roblox. I do not let my children use it. It is disturbing. I was once driving a carpool and some kids in my car were talking about a boyfriend that they had online and they had met them on Roblox. And the kids said that their boyfriend was 10 years old. And I was like, how do you know that? And they're like, yeah, they told me that. And I was thinking, this could be a 40-year-old man behind a screen. And it's creepy that little children are talking to strangers online. And last up in this lightning round, Google apparently fired a pregnant engineer on FMLA leave. This one is wild. A Google engineer took FMLA leave after a fall during her pregnancy. While she was on leave, Google laid her off as part of broader cuts. She's now suing, claiming pregnancy discrimination. But Google is saying it was part of layoffs that affected thousands and had nothing to do with her pregnancy. So this is going to come down to timing and intent, and it's a case to watch because it affects how FMLA protections work during a case of mass layoffs. And now we have petty court. The court is now in session. Welcome to Petty Court, where the stakes are low, the feelings are high, and I am the only judge that matters. Today's case, kind of riffing off the Buffalo Wild Wings story, is you're out to eat with some friends at a restaurant, and one of your friends just didn't like her food. She thought it was bland, tasteless. The waiter comes over. Does she have a right to complain about the food being not to her taste, not good, and disappointing, and try to get that written off the bill? She's being honest. She didn't like it. But do you have a right to complain about just not liking the food if it's just mid? My ruling? No. Every time you go and eat out, you're basically taking a chance. You might like it, you might not. It's a learning experience, and you get to decide if you want to go back there again. Now, if the food is completely raw, spoiled, something gross inside it, we can all imagine a bunch of scenarios where you kind of do have to tell the waiter something's seriously wrong with your plate. But the fact that you just think it wasn't really spiced well or you just didn't enjoy it, that's the luck of the draw. That's eating out. That's a life lesson for you for the future. Maybe you don't return. You don't get to just get a free meal, especially if you went and polished off that plate too, and then you get it written off because you just didn't like it. I know that restaurants work really hard to make people happy, and very often they will take that off the bill, but I don't know. To me, it just doesn't feel right. That's my ruling. My verdict is don't leave a bad Yelp review. Just learn and choose a different restaurant next time. This is life. Court is adjourned. That's episode 20. Prince Andrew was arrested, not the allegations that everyone expected. A judge ruled that boneless wings can stay boneless. Influencer prenups are protecting Instagram accounts like real estate. Bravo might be cracking down on Real Housewives of Salt Lake City with a mega clause. And Ghislaine Maxwell, who knows where she is right now? Come tell me which story got to you. Let me know on Instagram. My handle is Jasmine Weg ESQ. The podcast is at Exhibit A List Pod. And my handle on TikTok is Jazz the Lawyer. If you haven't followed the podcast yet, please do it now. If you have a second, leave a rating or review. It genuinely helps more people find this show. Just blind send it to everyone in your contacts. I think they'll all thank you for it. It's worth a shot. If they don't, let me know that too in my DMs. If someone in your life needs to hear any of this, you as a good citizen in this society must send it to them. Do your civic duty. You will feel so good after you have. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time on Exhibit A List. Stay curious, friends.